Good evening, and welcome to the Dreary Midnight Podcast. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, they.
My name is Celeste. My pronouns are she, her.
And today we are talking about the Holy Grail. Let's get into it. Intro music.
Intro music.
So we talked about a little bit off air, but what do you already know about the Holy Grail?
That's a loaded question. There's a lot of little things.
There's a
King Arthur.
Yeah.
He's important.
Mm-hmm.
Knights of
Knights
the
of the
Round
Round
Table.
Table. Yeah.
Holy Grail was a quest given to go find
The Holy Grail.
the Holy Grail.
Yeah. So
Was it the Grail that Jesus used? Is that what's holy about it?
So that's the kind of funny thing is that connection between like vaguely enchanted dishware and actual chalice that Jesus blessed was only made when Arthurian legend is being solidified.
Ooh. Wait, so did it exist before? No.
What do you mean?
Never mind. Stupid question.
Did the Holy Grail exist as a religious relic before Arthur?
Yes. Good. Oh my God, that's a stupid question.
Yeah. So
I'll let you get into everything.
From the beginning.
Ooh, I'm so excited.
So
I love Arthurian legends.
So let's just start with the Holy Chalice. And Matthew 26, 27 through 29. Yeah, I gotta put my mic down real quick.
You don't have the verses memorized?
Oh my God.
Lisa, what's wrong with you?
Good grief.
So fun thing about Catholic school is learning how to read a Bible.
Yeah. I mean,
it's actually pretty easy to find things.
Yes. Methodists also teach us how to read a Bible. And then in college, I did it again in Greek.
Ooh, that's fun and exciting. I guess I don't know how to read in Latin. Latin is just the language that those Catholics love to use. I know some Latin.
Yeah.
Mostly religious stuff.
So, Matthew 26, 27 through 29, for those of you who don't know Greek.
Yeah, I don't know Greek.
And he took a cup, and when he had given his things, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink this, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I shall not drink again of the fruit of the vine until I drink it new with you with my Father's kingdom." And that was Celeste's whispering along. You weren't making that up in your head.
Amen.
And so that translation is
ring the bells.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. My Catholicism is coming out.
So that translation comes from the New International Version. It also comes up in Mark and Luke and in 1 Corinthians as well. You'll notice that there's no actual description of what the cup looks like. For all we know, it's just some...
like earthenware cup.
Yeah. Again, I don't know economics of itinerant preachers 2,000 years ago, but I don't know if they necessarily always have the budget for, like, silver and fancy stone.
Didn't he just, like, rent out a little room and was like, me and the homies.
Yeah. And so...
Imagine if we go out to brunch. Imagine if I invite you out to brunch and I go, by the way, I'm going to die tonight. And I'm going to get arrested, and you're going to betray me. Huzzah!
And then it's like, okay, first of all, what the fuck?
Yeah,
and then second of all...
You're using your mimosa glass.
Yeah, and it's just like, if we're at a restaurant, if we go down to O'Connell's has, like, a ton of glasses that just look the same.
Yeah.
And that could, again, just be us in the 21st century applying it to... whatever 2,000 years ago, but one could imagine that if somehow Celeste or I became religious figures in the year 2024, we wouldn't be able to pin down exactly what glass from what brunch spot we used for all of that, right?
Exactly.
That doesn't stop pilgrims in the year 570 or even earlier. But
they were really into iconography
and
in general.
Reliquaries,
and reliquaries. And,
because apparently for a long time until like the 20th century, you had to have some sort of holy relic in order to be officially a Catholic
thing.
Yeah. church, some sort of place of worship, basilica, whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Forgot about that.
Until literally till the 60s. But
so they were like, this is the shoe that Jesus wore.
Not necessarily the shoe, but the slice of the cross, the chalice, the whatever.
Yeah. Well, isn't that why the Shroud of Turin is such a... Yeah.
So the earliest written description, saw this initially on Wikipedia and then cross-referenced it, but the pilgrim Antonius of Piacenza went to Jerusalem because it's common to go as a pilgrimage, and he saw, quote, the cup of onyx which our Lord blessed at the Last Supper,
onyx.
Unquote.
That's pretty.
And he saw it among a bunch of other relics that are at the basilica at Golgotha, which is where Christ was buried. About 100 years later, there's a pilgrim called Urkulf, which, what a name.
That's Urkulf.
Yeah. And he mentioned there is a chalice venerated as the one used in the Last Supper in a chapel near Jerusalem. And that one is located between the basilica and the martyrium.
Okay.
Martyrium. And it's described as a two-handed silver chalice with the measure of a Gaulish pint. I did not look up how much that is.
Okay.
Hey, it's Editing Lisa here. Just here to point out that in this instance, Gaulish does not necessarily mean French, though it is somewhat of a predecessor to French. According to Wikipedia, it's a now extinct Celtic language spoken in parts of continental Europe before and during the period of the Roman Empire. And it was spoken by Celts in the regions that are now make up France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Switzerland, and northern Italy. Still no word on what size and how many ounces their pints are, though. Just wanted to clarify that. Okay, bye. And
it went from onyx to
entirely different.
Exactly.
Yeah, silver.
Silver.
And
not too far.
Yeah.
We're getting a little lighter.
There are currently 4 that are identified, but we'll get into those in a little while.
It just doesn't make sense that it would be such an extravagant.
Yeah.
That's
the thing. And so I did have a book on relics. Read about that in a little while. But basically, there's one in Valencia. There's one in Genoa. There's one that's currently in the Met in New York. And there's one other that I didn't actually find where that one is. But again, if you think about it, technically, it's just some random cup.
Yeah.
We don't actually know if this one is for sure the one. There are 2 popes that have venerated one of them in particular, but we don't actually know for sure if that's the one.
No.
And I put into the notes here, for example, in archaeology, we were on a dig at this antebellum house, and I found this 1-inch fragment of a china dish, and it was the most interesting thing that anyone in our group found, because a lot of people were doing their reports on bits of brick.
Yeah.
So to find an actual cup, let alone the cup,
exactly,
is kind of a big thing. Joseph of Arimathea is often attributed for being responsible for Jesus' body after death, but it's not until the late 12th century that he's attributed as having taken blood from the body with the same chalice that Jesus had blessed.
Yeah.
Or at least not super solidified that it's the same one. That's, really old, first millennium. And then we get into the second millennium. Around the 12th century, end of the 12th century. Actually, not end of the 12th century just yet. We're going to take a pause in the 1090s to talk about Geoffrey of Monmouth. Because Geoffrey of Monmouth, nowadays, we are pretty sure most of his writing is myth and legend and written down from oral traditions and featuring embellishments from Geoffrey. But his is the first actual physical writing that mentions both Merlin and King Arthur. No Grail yet, necessarily. But he's the first to kind of get some sort of major king who's prophesied for big things. Yeah,
he's the one who wrote down, because I'm pretty sure that he was already in, King Arthur was already in the lexicon. He was probably just writing down the oral tradition, right?
Yeah. And there are areas in Wales that are potentially attributed to King Arthur, but that's its attribution via Geoffrey of Monmouth, and Monmouth is in Wales.
Yeah.
But fast forwarding 100 years to Chrétien de Troyes and Robert Boron, and they are the ones that cement the vaguely enchanted Grail part of the Arthurian legend. But Chrétien only ever said it was a Grail, not the Holy Grail that was a chalice from the Eucharist. So Chrétien wrote most of... It's incomplete. He writes Percival, the Story of the Grail. It includes a magical serving dish that does not have any holy connections. And in Percival, the Story of the Grail, Percival sees a procession through the main dining area, and the procession includes a bleeding lance and other cool and fancy things. And he sees all of this while he's dining at the enchanted home of the Fisher King.
Yes.
And the Fisher King is also dying.
Yeah.
And so they're taking all of that to the Fisher King, and the seemingly holy things are supposed to help, but it seems more that it's a big deal that they're enchanted rather than necessarily a holy connection. So there's a lance, there's a grail, there's candelabra, there's a bunch of things. But in 1180s France, which is contemporary to when Chrétien de Troyes was writing, a grail is not necessarily a cup.
Oh.
A grail...
I did not know that.
It would have been a wide serving dish, kind of deep, but not really. It's meant for fish. Oh. And the person carrying the dish...
it's the Fisher King.
Hey. But the person carrying the dish has just put a communion wafer on it instead of some sort of salmon or something.
Huh.
The point of interest is meant to be the communion wafer rather than...
the Grail.
The Grail itself. And apparently Percival is supposed to ask, like, what's the deal with the lance and the thing and the communion and whatever, and that's supposed to properly heal the king, but he's been ordered not to talk, so he doesn't.
That's so stupid. What a stupid plot hole. Like, not a plot hole, but, like, they can't blame Percival for that. They said, don't say anything. It's rude. And then they're like, why didn't they say anything?
He's dead and it's your fault.
Exactly.
So
it's like, bro, maybe don't tell people not to say stuff.
But it's cool if you ask about anything precise. Like, you have to say,
exactly.
Like, if there's an exception, you gotta say it, right? But, so that's Chrétien. And then Robert Boron wrote a narrative poem about Joseph of Arimathea. Okay. And according to this poem, Jesus comes to him after death, explains the powers of the cup situation, and makes Joseph responsible for it, and then draws a lot of connections from Joseph, getting it passed down to Percival eventually. Either way, Percival is usually associated with the Grail quest for about 100 years.
Yeah.
But notably absent from a lot of Arthurian mythos until the late 13th, early 14th century. Notably absent is the, like, Lancelot cheating, making Guinevere cheat, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's not around till Morte d'Arthur.
I know. Yeah. I watched breakdown, basically, of Arthurian legend, and the whole, like, Lancelot was just a freaking fan character. He was like an author, not self-insert, but he was basically
the
just
next thing
like
down from a self-insert.
A fan character that was like, you know what? Arthur sucks. This new guy is hot, and he believes in the idea of courtly love.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. So, and I feel like Lancelot and Galahad can be fan inserts, I feel like.
Galahad is definitely a fan insert. Yeah, Galahad is a Gary Stew, if there ever was one.
So,
he's just like the new, cooler version of Lancelot.
Yeah. So he's the new, cooler version of Lancelot and Percival. Yeah. And...
because he becomes the Grail holder after that, right?
So, Morte d'Arthur is iconic for the Lancelot Grail cycle. First of all, the Grail in this one is a metaphor for divine grace, and it's Galahad's quest. Galahad is the illegitimate son of Lancelot and Elaine, from a scene that feels a little bit coercive. Yeah. Having skimmed it, I didn't read everything, but it feels a little bit coercive, because everyone knows that Lancelot and Guinevere have a thing, except for Arthur.
Well, doesn't Elaine pretend to be Guinevere?
That's right, but that's still coercion.
Exactly, that's why.
Different type of coercion, weird. But it's still coercion.
They made, so Lancelot was made during the time when courtly love was seen as better than, moral obligations. So they're like, even if Guinevere is married to Arthur, Lancelot is still the good guy because courtly love. And it's like a forbidden romance.
Yeah.
But then when the Christians got a hold of it, it was like, ooh, but infidelity is bad. So Lancelot sucks. So now we're going to bring in Galahad because he's better than Lancelot because he doesn't do infidelity.
Yeah. So Galahad has all of the power-ups and none of the moral failings.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly.
It's a divine object that Galahad is looking for. Shows up in the narrative as the Sangreal quite frequently. It heals Lancelot at one point, and somehow Galahad ascends to heaven at the end because he's the holiest of all of the knights, and he's the one that's blessed with this Grail quest that healed his dad and all these other things. And it cements the Grail quest as the quest for a holy and divine object, the perfect thing that everyone is looking for but can't quite get to, because Lancelot is there, Percival is there, Galahad is there, I think Gawain shows up at one point, Arthur I think shows up towards the end too, mostly to be sad about Guinevere. There are apparently some connections to Welsh lore that I didn't get too much into. I did want to circle back to the...
Sorry, I could just talk about Arthurian legends for an hour.
And honestly, I want to get into... I did an entire honors class in college about Arthur and Arthurian legend.
Also, every time someone mentions Gawain, I just think of Dev Patel. God, he's so handsome.
And look to our Patreon for the Dev Patel tangent we posted months ago now.
That was one of our first episodes.
Or one of our first Patreon episodes. Anyway, according to Breverton's Phantasmagoria, some churches have claimed to hold the chalice. For example, the Santo Calixto de Valencia founded the Valencia Cathedral in Spain, and 2 popes have venerated that one, but neither have pronounced it to be authentic. There's another book called Relics, What They Are and Why They Matter. This is the Kindle edition, but under the section for the Holy Grail. So one of the early stories of the Grail is connected with this story of Joseph of Arimathea, with 2 versions being recorded of how he got it. Quote, "In one, the vessel was simply passed into his possession, and he used it to gather the blood of Jesus during the crucifixion. In the other, he received it from the hands of Jesus during a vision. After a time, it arrived in England, carried there by Joseph or one of his kin, and was there subsequently lost." A lot of the stories of the Grail are kind of all over the place, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so the church doesn't usually acknowledge it. There's a lot of different stories about how authentic is it really, which of these 4 is really interesting. So Relics, What They Are and Why They Matter focuses on 2 of the 4 that have been seeking authentication. One is located in the US and the other is in Spain and Valencia. Yeah. So in New York, the cup in the US is in the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and that's the one that has some sort of scientific backing. Quote, "Its discovery occurred in the year 1910 when Syria was experiencing a severe drought."
1910, that's very recent.
Yeah. The starving had to resort to digging for roots or anything that was edible. During these struggles, surprising discoveries of ancient dry wells yielded all manner of treasures, which were offered for sale to antique dealers. One such dry well yielded a treasury of altar vessels, probably hidden for safekeeping during a time of invasion. Among the articles was a chalice, and it in turn attracted the attention of historians and scientists who called it the Chalice of Antioch for the city near its place of discovery. Examiners and viewers of the cup immediately recognized its unusual and rare qualities.
Oh.
The vessel is in 2 parts, the inner cup being composed of plain silver of great age, which has a capacity of 2.5 quarts. The outer chalice is of intricately carved silver. Dr. William Newbold, who is associated with the University of Pennsylvania, suggests that the cup is older than the holder, since the holder was apparently made to preserve and exhibit it. The sacredness of the inner cup seems confirmed, since it was thought worthy and deserving of the costly and magnificent holder. And there's another professor that concurs, Gustavus Eisen, and he's an authority on Christian art, and the former curator of the California Academy of Science. And he studied it for 9 years, and his, quote, his learned opinion is that the inner cup is the Holy Grail used by Jesus at the Last Supper. The ornately carved outer cup has more than 240 designs, including animal and botanical items, 2 figures of Christ, with additional figures gathered in 2 groups of 5 each. It is regarded as significant that there are 10 instead of 12. 12 would be the apostles, but 10. Professor Newbold explains that in one group represents the Church of the East, the other is the Church of the West. Only one period in church history would justify placing 2 groups of 5 men in a position of authority and prestige. That being the time immediately following AD 50, when 2 Christian churches existed, Church of Jerusalem and the Church of Antioch. That's the mother church of Gentile Christians, and Church of Jerusalem is mother church of Jewish Christians. Each was governed by 5 men.
The listeners cannot see my face, but my jaw is fucking dropped.
Jaw on the floor. And so that sort of, given calendrics, it's likely that that one in particular is from the 1st century.
What the how could I never heard of this before? The fact that we found the Holy Grail.
A potential Holy Grail.
It's got more potential than the others.
Yeah. And so, but still, how did it get from Jerusalem to Antioch?
How did it get from Jerusalem to Antioch?
The Acts of the Apostles say that Barnabas and Saul traveled with the cup to Antioch.
Good old Saul.
Yep. And again, that's from a book called Relics, What They Are and Why They Matter. And that is by Joan Carroll Cruz. And it'll be linked in the show notes as well. But there's also Grail at the Cathedral of Valencia, which is composed of a dark red oriental cornelian, which is from Roman. And cornelian is a orangish red semi-precious stone. Yeah, and so it's shaped like a chalice with a bowl and a stem and a base, but the very top is in gold, and it has handles on the sides. But that first one is the one that it's been verified as holy by 2 different popes, but not necessarily the confirmed as the absolute one. And there's a ton more we can say about Arthurian legend.
Well, I'm surprised you didn't mention Monty Python.
I was literally about to, because this was brought to you in part by the fact that I had a student group in New York at the end of March that saw Monty Python's Spamalot in his last week on Broadway. And in that one, the Grail quest is Arthur's quest. It's a fun show.
Yeah.
And there's a whole tourism tales I could do on that trip because wild.
Oh my God.
But yeah, no, I made friends with the line manager basically because I showed up an hour before we needed to actually be there.
Oh.
And so like made friends with her, and she was telling me all the behind the scenes things. And so like there are a couple times where the actors can just kind of riff on everything. So the date we saw it, there's the knights who say knee.
Yeah.
And in the movie, they come back with the shrubbery. And they say, we are no longer the knights who say knee. We're the knights who say icky, icky, patang, to toilet, mom.
Exactly.
But this is live theater. So they said, we are no longer the knights who say knee. We are the knights who say icky, icky, patang. And then they sang part of a Boys to Men song. And we're like, is he gonna repeat this entire full verse of a Boyz II Men song,
God.
and they're like, "Yep,
He did.
he did."
That is
because like,
so
yeah,
funny.
it was great. And then there's Lady of the Lake, who you can also have. We could do an entire thing on.
Lady of the Lake.
Yeah. But she's a character also in Monty Python and in Spamalot, and so she does the whole ballad of find your Grail and all the quest and then that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a fun show. I'm glad I saw it before it went off Broadway. But
yeah, I'm glad you did too.
Yeah. But
perks of being a tour guide is that you get to go and do fun things with groups sometimes.
Listen, I might get my New York license specifically so I can get into Broadway for free. But yeah.
But yes. If you guys haven't seen the movie Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail.
Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yes.
Definitely watch that.
Watch it. Also,
one of the very first musicals I fell in love with was Camelot. And the guy who plays Arthur in the movie version was Richard Harris, who also played Dumbledore in the first two Harry Potter movies. There's so many facets of Arthurian legend we can talk about later.
We can talk about Lancelot, we can talk about Guinevere, we can talk about Morte Arthur, we can talk about Mordred and all that.
Yeah, and Idols of the King as well. But we can even talk about like Camelot as a concept. One of the big things, musical Camelot came out, I want to say in like the late 60s, early 60s with I think it was the Kennedy administration, was sometimes called Camelot or like Avalon. It was a very idealized time, like a couple of years in American history because there's a young family and this whole thing. And for a good 3 years, everything was great. And then we're not going to talk about Vietnam or protests or anything like that.
A lot of stuff happened.
Couple things, you know.
Either way.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. We're just going on tangent after tangent
but
here.
With all that said, that's all I have for the Holy Grail.
We will definitely come back to Arthurian.
Yes, we'll visit later. Arthur quite frequently. The makeup community sometimes says, "Oh, your Holy Grail foundation or your Holy Grail whatever."
Holy Grail.
Yeah, Holy Grail makeup products.
That's like the colloquials. Like, this is my
it's like
Holy Grail.
Like,
and not even just makeup, just in general.
Just like in general, this book is my Holy Grail, this sparkling water is my Holy Grail, or whatever. But the sort of...
Sparkling water is Belle
V Lime, it's the Aldi house brand. But the... Belle V is my Holy Grail for sparkling water because it is cost effective and delicious. But the whole thing about the Grail mythos is that like Mort Arthur kind of ends with no living person is going to find it again. And a lot of the colloquialism is like, oh yeah, it's the Holy Grail. It's our tippy top best thing ever. But at least with the makeup community, we've kind of realized that like, okay, you find your tippy top best whatever, and then you use it most of the way up, and then you start looking for something different many times.
It's like a goal that can never be achieved.
Yeah, goal that can never be achieved. And on that note, send a message on Instagram at drearymidnightpod.
Or you can email us.
Email drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com. Tell us your Holy Grail makeup. I'm working on updating the website, drearymidnightpod.wordpress.com. Patreon.
Patreon.
Become a patron.
If you want to listen to that Dev Patel rant
that
we did a few months ago.
Yeah.
Maybe even a year ago at this point.
It was a while ago. It's in the old apartment, so it's at least 6 months old at this point. But with all that said, do go questing, but don't cheat on your spouse.
Yeah.
Don't coerce people, just in general.
And it's okay to ask if someone has a bleeding lance, what the hell is up with that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, if you just see someone carrying a fish dish
with a communion wafer,
with just a communion wafer, maybe say something. Even if it's, are you sure you didn't forget the fish for that dish? And safe travels home on your Holy Grail quest. Good night.
Good night.